Chapter 270. 2. I'm nitpicking. It has to be you get out. I've said that I do not want anyone else, but just that girl named Qingyu to come serve me. Qingyu had just reached the door when a white jade porcelain vase was thrown out from inside, hurtling straight towards the head of the attendant girl beside her, the one who had led her all the way here. The vase was about half an arm's length and about as thick as one's wrist. Although it was not exactly large, but it was still porcelain which would be quite a heavy strike when smashed onto a person. Eek! The attendant girl was completely stunned by the item hurtling straight towards her face, and could do nothing but scream loudly, unable to even dodge. Qingyu's brows twitched a couple of times. The attendant girl should logically possess a significant level of cultivation as well, but doesn't she possess the most basic common sense? To dodge when faced with danger? Truly a classic example of an embroidered pillow. Nice to look at but of no practical use. Seeing what was happening, Qingyu took a step forward to pull the attendant girl to the side, and stretched her other hand out to catch the flying porcelain vase in midair, before smoothly placing it onto the table at the side as she said, "Why is guild leader Zhuge doing this? What is it that you can't just tell us calmly, but is throwing things about like a woman here?" Upon hearing that voice, Zhuge Xiong's face lit up with joy, and he immediately turned around to look. Upon seeing the person that he wanted to see the most, he then said, "Miss Yu Qing, you're finally here. If I did not come here, I'm afraid that guild leader Zhuge would have tossed everything out from the house." Qingyu said through stiffened lips, her face not showing any expression as she spoke. Hearing that, Zhuge Xiong showed a rare moment of awkward embarrassment, but he quickly recovered and said with a laugh, "All of this is merely just a joke. I merely want the young Miss Yu to." "You want me to serve you?" Qingyu lifted her eyes to glance at him. "Guild leader Zhuge, I am the Temple Lord's personal attendant, who looks after the Temple Lord specifically. Don't you think that your demand is a little too much? So what? I am a guest here, and it is the duty of all of you here to take good care of all my needs. That includes me wanting you to be the one to attend to me, which encompasses warming my bed." Zhuge Xiong let out a scoffing laugh. His face twisted up to look at her with an evil look in his eyes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The more he was denied something, the more interested he would be in it. Warm your bed. Qingyu arched an eyebrow up, seeming a little surprised. Winter seems long past, and we are already almost about to welcome the summer season. Why would guild leader Zhuge still need someone to warm his bed? Unless it is because your kidneys are weak and your body so frail that you're so afraid of the cold? Zhuge Xiong's wide smile on his face suddenly froze in place. What did this wretch just say? His kidneys are weak, and his body frail. She really dares to shoot her mouth off, doesn't she? Chapter 270. 3. I'm nitpicking. It has to be you. Looks like he really has to make her have a taste of just how strong and virile he really is, and his great skills. Otherwise, she would continue to spout all that nonsense with that mouth of hers. Zhuge Xiong showed a sinister smile on his face as he took a step forward, thinking to grab the young lady. But the body of the young lady suddenly fell back, to be wrapped up tightly in someone's embrace. Zhuge Xiong's hands grasped at nothing but air. The skies have not even darkened yet. What is guild leader Zhuge trying to do here? The sexily low and magnetic male voice sounded in her ears. Qingyu raised her head up as she was held in his arms, looking right into the man's strong and flawless jawline. His skin so smooth and fair it seemed to be glowing. Feeling her gaze on him, the man then lowered his head to look at her, his eyes slightly narrowed, and carrying a hint of concealed danger. His thin lips then parted slightly, where he soundlessly mouthed several words to her. "I'll deal with you later." Qingyu was speechless. What wrong did she commit that he had to do this? Upon seeing the young lady held submissively, and not moving an inch in Lu Junyao's arms, Zhuge Xiong could not help but feel infuriation rise up inside. Why? Does he have to lose to this man in everything? Cultivation, status, looks, and now he was even going to lose to him competing for a woman? She was so feisty with claws drawn facing him, but obedient like a timid little kitten before Lu Junyao. Just what was it that is so great about that man? Zhuge Xiong became more frustrated the more he thought about it. He clenched his jaws tight as he squeezed these sarcastic words through gritted teeth. What a coincidence! Did the Dark Overlord specially make such a big detour to come such a long way over here to where I am staying? Unknown to the two of them, Qing Luoyan had arranged for them to stay far apart from each other, because she was afraid that there would be some kind of conflict, placing one in the eastern end, the other in the north, thinking that it would take at least an hour's walk before they could possibly meet even if they wanted to pick a fight with each other. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You hearing the sarcasm in the man's words, Lu Junyao merely smiled faintly and said, "How unfortunate. I came out to look for this lass as well, but did not expect to find guild leader Zhuge here as well, and almost witnessed a show where a tyrant was about to force himself upon a young lady. What nonsense are you spouting here?" Zhuge Xiong roared in unbridled rage. "Have I been mistaken?" Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow in feigned surprise, and then went on to say, "It's great that this has all turned out to be just a misunderstanding. I will then take the young lady with me." Upon saying that, he put an arm around Qingyu and was going to just leave. "Wait a minute." Zhuge Xiong raised his voice to exclaim loudly. "I was the one who summoned her here, so it is only natural that she should serve me. What do you think you are doing here, snatching her forcibly away?" Chapter 270. 4. I'm nitpicking. It has to be you. Lu Junyao curled up his lips. "Let me ask you this. Who is she willing to leave with? It was just earlier today that she said she admires me in her heart, so I would think that question need not be asked. You. That will be all." Lu Junyao tossed out those few words, and suddenly turned his eyes around. His devilishly mesmerizing eyes met with Zhuge Xiong's in that instant. "My patience has run out, and I do not want to continue with such games with you any longer." That one glance was scathingly cold. Even though Zhuge Xiong immediately turned his eyes away to avoid the man's sharp icy glare, he felt as if the blood in his body had reversed its flow for an instant, an extremely discomfiting feeling. By the time he came back to his senses, Lu Junyao had already walked a long distance away from there. The original attendant girl who first came had not left, but Zhuge Xiong had lost all mood now, and he chased the woman away angrily, before slamming the violently shut. On the other side, after Lu Junyao led Qingyu to walk a distance away, and there was no one around them, his body suddenly shimmered briefly, and the two of them were suddenly in the northern courtyard that Lu Junyao was staying at in the very next second. It took Qingyu a good while before she was able to react, her eyes staring straight at him. "Are you crazy? How can you bring me here? What if we are discovered?" Lu Junyao looked at her getting all flustered, and could not help but pinch her on her tiny nose as he said, "Relax. As long as I do not want anyone to see, nobody will be able to see anything here in this place." Hearing that, Qingyu then said in infuriation, "You're one to talk. Why did you suddenly do that earlier today? If I had not reacted quickly enough, Qing Luoyan would have kicked me out of here thinking that I have hidden intentions here. I could not endure it any longer." Lu Junyao said as he looked at her with a serious expression on his face. "That scum took advantage of you right in front of me. The fact that I did not destroy him on the spot already shows my restraint. It was just a touch of my hand. It's not enough that he touched your hand. You're mine alone, and that includes every single strand of hair on your head. If anyone dares to even touch you, I will kill him." Lu Junyao said with his eyes narrowed dangerously, a sinister glint of murder flashing in his eyes. He did not kill that Zhuge Xiong right now, because there was still some use for the man. After that is done, his life would definitely be forfeit. That man had only touched Qingyu's hand earlier, but his repeated covetous attempts towards her, where he even sought to take her by force, already put him on the path towards inevitable death. Seeing the unfriendly look on the man's face, Qingyu palmed her face in helplessness before she reached a hand out to caress that handsome face, her voice gentle and comforting as she said, all right, don't be angry anymore. Someone like that guy is a far way off from being able to do anything to me. See, I am fine, right?" Lu Junyao harumphed and grabbed the hand she placed next to his lips, biting it in frustration. "Little imp, always bewitching everyone everywhere. I should really just lock you up." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. When did I go bewitch anyone? Qingyu glared at him as she asked. The moment she said that, Lu Junyao's tone of voice began to change. Pursuing all the way from the lower realms up to cloud heaven. So completely enamored and hopeless in love with you. Are you touched by that? Qingyu was stunned for a moment, and did not completely realize what the man was really saying. Lu Junyao then opened his mouth again to remind the young lady. That assassin you saved back then. That was when Qingyu understood the man's words, and she immediately rolled her eyes in resignation. That fella is really a little too talkative. Chapter 271. 1. This is her punishment. She had not even done anything at all, but that fella had still gone to tell on her to Lu Junyao. Seeing the young lady knit her brows up and looking highly indignant, Lu Junyao could not help but find it amusing. He lowered his head and leaned in close to her face, his warm breath that was so close to her strangely stirring. Qingyu immediately felt a little uncomfortable, and she stretched her hand out to push the man away. In the end, the man held her hand tightly and asked her, "What? You've done something wrong, and you still dare to get angry with me instead. I must have really indulged you a little much." Hearing that, Qingyu could not be bothered with how close he was sticking to her, and just looked at him in bewilderment. What wrong did I commit? How could she not realize it? Or had that talkative subordinate of his spouted nonsense to him? Still not going to admit it? Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow, feigning displeasure as he continued. When other men come so close to you, don't you know to keep a distance from them yourself? Qingyu then realized that he was referring to how Shi Zhanchen had hugged her. Her expression looked a little helpless as she said, I did not let him hug me intentionally, and moreover it was just for an instant. He let go of me very quickly, and before I was even able to react, he was already gone. There were many things that she wanted to ask him, but he had left very quickly, like there were things he could not say to her. The decision to reveal his identity was also something he had thought long and hard about, after hesitating for a very long time. In her mind, she knew that if there was something that Shi Zhanchen wanted to tell her, he would definitely speak up when the opportunity arose. She had almost forgotten about the matter entirely, and this fellow was really being infuriatingly persistent. Seeing the man's slightly displeased look on the man's face, Qingyu let out a sigh, and then hooked her hand around the man's neck, and pulled him towards her, before she then leaned forward to lay a kiss upon the man's lips that were tightly pressed together. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Just as the man was caught by surprise for a moment, she opened her mouth to say, that couldn't even be considered a hug at all with him. You are the man I am closest to, and the one I love the most. No matter how great any other man is, I will not even bother to give them a second glance. Seeing Lu Junyao's expression starting to look rather pleased, Qingyu then said, so if you still continue to get jealous over a whole lot of nothing in future, I will make sure I really do the things that will make you jealous. You dare? Lu Junyao immediately shot her a furious glare. A corner of Qingyu's lips lifted up in a smirk. You'll see whether I dare to for yourself. Seeing the stern and serious expression on the young lady's face, Lu Junyao's anger immediately deflated, and he quickly said coaxingly, all right. I will not fly into a jealous rage over nothing next time, though it's because I care about you just too much. Who asked you to be so beautiful looking that made all those dirty and filthy men want to stick their eyeballs right onto you the moment they see you? Chapter 271. 2. This is her punishment. The man's words carried a hint of indignant aggrievement on this rare occasion, like a little beast that was being protective of its food. When did this haughty and arrogant fella ever show such a side of himself? It was only in front of Qingyu that he would reveal such a childish side of himself. Qingyu found it both amusing and infuriating when she heard that, and she looked at him rather frustratedly as she said, you're one to talk. You're not much better than me, where people are heard talking about you wherever I go. Look at your own face here. Not only do women like it so much, a good number of men would also harbor hidden intentions towards you. You're just turning this around onto me. We were clearly talking about you. Why are you dragging me into it? Lu Junyao could not help but laugh as he reached his hand out helplessly to stroke the young lady's head. Suddenly leaning his face in close to her again, he then said, give me another kiss. Didn't I just kiss you? Qingyu ignored the man's request and stretched her hand out to push his face away. However, the man employed the technique he always used on her, making his face that was so good-looking it infuriated both mortals and gods to rest against her hand, give a highly innocent look. The beautiful violet eyes limpid like purple crystals blinking intermittently at her, filled with a look of longing and anticipation. Qingyu felt utterly helpless and could only put her palm over her face. She lifted her head up and then leaned in to kiss him on his lips. But that kiss was not like the light fleeting peck earlier. Lu Junyao had expected that her heart would soften to make her give in, waiting just for her to take the bait. Her lips had just come in close when Lu Junyao immediately wrapped himself around her tightly, seemingly not going to let her go anymore. The kiss was ferocious and dominating, and Qingyu felt as if the air in her lungs were being taken away by the man. Her cheeks gradually flushed red, and her fingers holding the man's waist subconsciously began to tighten. "Open your mouth and breathe." It was after a good long while that the man's magnetic voice that was tinged with mirth came to sound in her ears. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The moment she was released, Qingyu immediately gasped heavily for air, her flawlessly exquisite face carrying a bright rosy tint, her narrow upslanted eyes misty, looking highly lovable. Lu Junyao felt his heart flutter, and could not help but to lean forward to bite the young lady's luscious lips that had turned red from that kiss, saying teasingly, "We've been intimate so many times already. Why are you always still so shaken? Who would be so well practiced like you, being so experienced and an absolute veteran at this?" Qingyu said as she shot the man an angry glare. Lu Junyao blinked his eyes innocently at her. "That's such a wrongful accusation. There are some things that men are born to be proficient at, and that has nothing to do with past experience in the slightest. You're acting really rashly here. This is the Bright Moon Temple we're in now, and the way you've been acting towards me is clearly not normal, and I'm sure that Qing Luoyan would have suspected something. Moreover, you came to snatch me away from Zhuge Xiong earlier, and he will definitely tell Qing Luoyan about it, complaining that you've pitted yourself against the Hunters Guild over a mere attendant maid." Chapter 271. 3. This is her punishment, so what? Lu Junyao snorted contemptuously. That guy is not even worthy of becoming an adversary. I had not wanted to bother myself with that guy, but he actually dared to come set his sights on you. That was when I decided that I wouldn't mind bullying the weak just like him, to take him down a peg or two. Qingyu did not say anything against that decision, as she found that Zhuge Xiong to be rather detestable as well, so that was nothing wrong with teaching him a lesson here. Qingyu then turned to look at the sky outside that was gradually becoming darker, and she opened her mouth to say, "I should go back now." Lu Junyao grabbed her wrist and raised an eyebrow before he said, "Why would you go back? What if that coward comes to harass you again? He will not. You've already given him a warning, so how could he possibly dare to come pester me? Even if he still has not given up, I am not someone to be trifled with as well." Qingyu shot him a reassuring smile, and then went on to say, "You get some rest. Qing Luoyan will become suspicious if she cannot find me. I do not want all the effort I've put in to go to waste." Hearing that, Lu Junyao had to let go of her, his voice gentle as he reminded her, "Be very careful with everything you do." I will." Ever since Qing Lanfei recovered all her lost soul fragments, she found that her cultivation was being restored day by day, and her body was no longer as frail as before. And she was also picking back up her skills in medicine that she had not practiced for so many years. The person who was happiest to know that was actually Bai Qiu. He had wanted to have Qing Lanfei go to the Mind-Free Peak as the divine healer's sex representative, but had been rejected before because her body had not been in a good, and it would be too dangerous for her. But now, seeing that Qing Lanfei's condition was gradually improving every day, and might possibly recover her cultivation to the level when she was at her peak before, the possibility that she would go to the Mind-Free Peak become much higher. Night fell. Qing Lanfei was originally meditating with her eyes closed, but had unknowingly fallen asleep just like that. Dazed and groggy, she had come to some place. She was out in the wilds, the place frighteningly empty and desolate, a white misty fog surrounding her in all directions. Qing Lanfei lifted her foot to take a couple of careful probing steps forward, but nearly stepped into nothing but air to fall into emptiness, barely managing to pull her leg back to stand unmoving in her original spot. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Where is this place? Everywhere her eyes saw was only the impenetrable white fog, unable to see anything else. She had never come to this place before, but it felt strangely familiar to her. Lanfei, you finally returned. An old elderly voice reached her coming out of nowhere. Qing Lanfei froze stiffly in place, her eyes a little flustered as she looked around her warily. Chapter 271. For, this is her punishment, that voice. Who is it? Why does it feel so familiar? Like it was someone she used to know very well. But she just cannot remember anything. Just as she was trying to determine the direction that voice had come from, that voice sounded softly once more to say, back then, for the sake of one man, you separated yourself from your master's pupillage and spurned your master's advice, choosing to be rid of your spirit powers to become immortal, suffering the miserable vestiges of the mortal world. Do you now regret that choice you made? What is he talking about? What is all this talk about separating from pupillage and choosing to be rid of spirit powers? Why does she not understand a word of all that? Once you become mortal, you will not escape aging, sickness and death. The day will come that you will die. Qing Lanfei felt a throbbing pain in her head. Hearing that voice was making her feel miserable, and she tried to shake the agony out of her head. Do not speak anymore. Don't say anything more, as I do not know what you are talking about, and I have no interest in listening. Sigh, you've really turned into a mortal and become so useless. The voice went on to say disdainfully. He then went on to say ominously, I heard that you went on to bear that man a pair of twins, a boy and a girl who are rather gifted. In that case, we will take it as having your twin children, to come make amends for the wrong you committed in the past. Treasure the time you have with them till the day you will bid them goodbye. When the Mind-Free Peak opens, that will be the day they will come in. What you owe the Mind-Free Peak will be repaid by your children. No, do not take away my children. Qing Lanfei let out a helpless scream and woke up pale-faced with her back bathed in cold sweat. Mo Jingyu was staying just next door, and he immediately rushed over when he heard the noise, only to see the woman's face turn pale, without the slightest bit of color on it. Horror rose up in his heart, and he quickly went over to embrace Qing Lanfei's icy cold body. Fei Air, what's wrong? Did you have another nightmare? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He had not forgotten that she had woken up flustered with her face in a panic from her dreams, just like this before. Qing Lanfei's eyes that looked like they had lost focus, then slowly started to recover upon hearing his voice. She held Mo Jingyu's hands tightly and asked him anxiously, Little Bei, where is Little Bei? Mo Jingyu was taken aback by surprise, and he replied in puzzlement. Little Bei would naturally be sleeping in his room at this time. Is something wrong? Has Little Yu returned? Qing Lanfei continued to ask. Don't you remember? Little Yu is now stuck at the place she is at, and is unable to come back at this moment. Chapter 272. 1. Unable to escape the chains of fate, oh right. Qing Lanfei's tensed-up nerves then seemed to finally relax slightly. Mo Jingyu's brows were still deeply furrowed as he watched the woman's face bathed in cold sweat, and he said to her in a deep voice, What happened? Is there something you are not able to tell me? It's nothing. It's just a bad dream. It's nothing to make such a big fuss about. Qing Lanfei shook her head, a smile curving up the ends of her lips. But against that ghastly pale face, that smile looked a little forced. You're still trying to brush it off like this? Do you know how long you've been acting like this? Even if it's just a bad dream, how can a person possibly have the same dream so many times in a row? Mo Jingyu seldom spoke to her in such a stern tone, his handsome-looking face not showing the slightest sliver of a smile. So tell me now, what is wrong here? You even asked me where our two children are. Are they in some kind of danger? It must be said that though Mo Jingyu was usually never serious in their daily interaction with each other, he was the person who understood Qing Lanfei the most. So from her words and actions that he just saw, He was able to make a rather good guess. As expected, the moment those words from Mo Jingyu came out, Qing Lanfei's irises contracted slightly, and her already pale face turned white as a sheet, making her look frighteningly frail. Jingyu, can you not ask anymore? Qing Lanfei's voice suddenly sounded rather choked up. Her head drooped down with her face buried deep into her palms, and her thin shoulders shaking slightly, like she was struggling through grievous misery. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I really do not know what to do. Why would they go back on their word when they had clearly agreed to let me go? Why do they want to inflict the punishment onto my precious children? As Qing Lanfei spoke, she could not help weeping softly. She had always been a strong-willed woman and seldom shed a tear. But here she was, tears spilling out through the fingers of her hands that were held over her face, dripping onto the bed. Mo Jingyu's heart winced painfully as he watched her, and pulled her into a tight embrace, his voice soothing as he said, "My good little Fei heir, don't cry anymore. We will face it together no matter what it is. Why must you choose to take it all upon yourself? Do you not believe in me?" Qing Lanfei sobbed soundlessly for a good long while, and when she raised her head up, she had stopped crying, but her beautiful eyes were swollen and frighteningly red. She laughed weakly, and with a slightly hoarse voice that was tinged with helplessness and despair, she then spoke. "Of course I believe in you. I always have. But Jingyu, do you know? There are some things that one would not be able to change no matter how strong a person is, or how much power and authority he commands in these lands." Chapter 272. 2. Unable to escape the chains of fate, Mo Jingyu looked at the woman, his expression a little taken aback. "What are you trying to say?" Qing Lanfei lowered her eyes and took a long while before her voice sounded slowly to say, "Because we are still just mortals after all, and are helpless against the mysterious powers beyond the reach of mortals. This power you speak of, what is it?" Mo Jingyu had a feeling that what Qing Lanfei was about to tell him would be beyond anything he had ever known. Things that would be completely unimaginable. "Do you still remember why you had pursued me so relentlessly back in the beginning?" Qing Lanfei raised her eyes up and looked intently into his eyes. "It was because you were known as Cloud Heaven's most highly skilled pugilist back then, and you were defeated by a mere young lady. And he had lost very badly, taken down in less than 10 moves. Mo Jingyu was a little taken aback, not knowing why she would suddenly bring that up, but he still nodded his head. Of course he still remembered that. He had even sulked for a very long time back then, and suspected whether his cultivation had weakened for him to be defeated by such a young woman. But it was also because he was so thoroughly beaten that he started to develop such a strong interest towards this woman, which blossomed uncontrollably into love and affection for this woman. But he could not figure out how that came to happen, and had gone back to test his own skills properly, only to discover that his cultivation had not deteriorated in the slightest. He had been blessed with incredible gift that surpassed most people, and was earnest and serious in his training, leading his cultivation to advance speedily. He had already challenged almost every single one of Cloud Heaven's most powerful pugilists, and had achieved an unblemished winning streak, which then won him the title as Cloud Heaven's most powerful pugilist. Who would have ever thought that he would end up losing to a young little girl? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It could be well imagined just how terrifying Qing Lanfei was back at that time, that even the maniacally strong Mo Jingyu was not her match. He had even suspected whether Qing Lanfei had taken some kind of elixir that boosted her cultivation, or had taken some evil path, where she had to pay an equivalent price in exchange for unsurpassable power. But reality proved that Qing Lanfei's freakishly powerful cultivation was in no way fake, or any kind of trickery. Every part of it real and solid. Qing Lanfei saw that the man seemed to have fallen deep into memories of the past, and her lips curved up to laugh softly before she continued to say, "And also how I never seem to fall ill or get injured. Even if I happen to suffer some kind of a wound, I will also recover very quickly from it. That I know. That is because of the unique characteristic the flame element possesses," Mo Jingyu replied. Chapter 272. 3. Unable to escape the chains of fate. Actually, Not all of it is because of the flame element. Qing Lanfei stretched her hand out, and the expression on her face seemed a little self-mocking. But the current me does not possess the abilities of the flame element anymore. I am now susceptible to illness and injury, will bleed and die, and my cultivation is nothing like it was before. Jingyu, do you know why? Hearing those words from her, it then seemed to dawn upon Mo Jingyu. It was true that back from 100 years ago, just before they fell into misfortune, there had already been subtle changes in certain places. For instance, she was able to heal in a blink when she bled from a wound in the past, and commanded extraordinarily powerful skills that seemed to be beyond the limits of mortals, like she possessed impossible strength and power that shouldn't even exist. But time passed, and he did not know exactly when it started. It was when they were joking around and play fighting that he surprised her with a sneak attack, and she actually failed to dodge his strike. There was also another incident where she ran a fever in the middle of the night, and it took 2 whole nights before her fever broke. That bout of sickness even causing her to grow thinner and look a little more pallid. He had teased and made fun of her back then, never once thinking much about it. Thinking back on it now, all of that were points that warranted some suspicion. Why had she suddenly become weaker? The 5 major powers in Cloud Heaven might seem to be mighty and powerful, but no matter how strong they are no match against divine power. Unbeknownst to people, the place that everyone claims to be a realm of divinity is actually just a certain hell that holds power transcending different worlds, a place that the people who are chosen will not be able to escape from for eternity. Once those sad and depressing words came out from Qing Lanfei, Mo Jingyu's eyes suddenly flared wide, as he came to ask in a rather incredulous voice. You mean the Mind-Free Peak? Yes, Qing Lanfei nodded. That is where I am from. But you are the daughter of the Divine Temple's godly lord. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I am. But I was also the Mind-Free Peak's chosen sacrifice. Qing Lanfei laughed bitterly. Because I possessed the mutated flame element and was useful to them, I was taken away by the Mind-Free Peak shortly after I was born, released back out only after I turned 10. During that period, they arranged a substitute that lived in the Divine Temple in my place for 10 years, to avoid raising any suspicion. Speaking up till that point, Qing Lanfei sighed a long sigh before she continued. I was aware of my fate deep inside, and my personality underwent a very drastic change, becoming cold and aloof, keeping my distance from people. But then I met you, and that changed all my thoughts. I have always been controlled by the Mind-Free Peaks people, and they know my every move and action very well. They have always paid very close attention to the flame element I possess until the time I became intimate with you. The flame element's power could only be brought out fully by one with an uncorrupted body, usually sharing a better compatibility with females than with males, and the martial arts she cultivated needed one to maintain an undefiled body in order to learn them. Chapter 272. 4. Unable to escape the chains of fate, the Mind-Free Peak had extracted blood that held the flame element's power from her body, and employed a secret unique method to inject it into the bodies of another powerful pugilist, which gave that person the same quick self-healing ability, preserving his life even if he was grievously wounded. They had carefully groomed her for so many years, but she had ruined all their plans, never expecting that she would lose her virginity after she came of age. And with her being tainted, it was clear that the child would be abandoned. She was supposed to be killed, but her master did not take her life so viciously in the end, but just took away the divine power she attained in the Mind-Free Peak, and erased her past 10 years' memories. From then on, she was just the Bright Moon Divine Temple's 11th princess, and everything that happened in the past had nothing to do with her anymore, nor would she ever remember a thing about it. She had originally thought that she would be able to live peacefully from then on, but she was still unable to escape this fate. The curse of the flame element had descended once again unto her pair of twins. She would never forget how her master had told her in her dreams that the flame element her daughter possessed was more pure and powerful than hers, and that she would become a much better puppet weapon. How can that be allowed to happen? How could she do nothing but just watch her child go on to suffer the same unfortunate fate she has been through? Qing Lanfei's fingers clenched up tightly into fists, as she told him all the cause and effects that had led to what was about to happen through red-rimmed eyes. Mo Jingyu just listened in silence, till Qing Lanfei finished everything she had to say. He then slowly turned to gaze at her, and placed a hand onto the back of her cold hand, his voice soft and tender as he asked, "Fei heir, do you believe in fate?" Qing Lanfei's mouth opened, like she was going to say something, but the words did not come out through her lips. "No matter how things end up, I have never believed in fate, not even once, as a person's fate is grasped in his own hands." Mo Jingyu gazed at the woman who was looking a little puzzled and lost, and his handsome countenance slowly broke into a smile. "Do not worry. Nothing will become any worse. We are both people who have died once before, and there is nothing much we fear. As long as we are still alive, no one, or any sort of power, can separate our family." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. I believe that our children are not fearful of this as well. Aren't they being brave as well? Mo Jingyu raised a hand, and gently wiped away the teardrop from the corner of her eyes. Qing Lanfei looked at the man's tender eyes and felt her heart wrench up. She suddenly embraced him tightly, and buried her head within his arms, her voice soft but sounded filled with steely resolve. "Jingyu, the one thing I will never ever regret throughout this life is to have fallen in love with you. I am so fortunate that I can be together with you." Mo Jingyu bent his head and placed a kiss, light as a feather, on the woman's hair, his thick lashes lowering over his eyes that held back his deep affection and tenderness. "That I am able to stand by Qing Lanfei in this life, it is enough." Chapter 273. 1. The loving father and son at loggerheads. The next day, people from the Dark Lands and the Hunters Guild bade their farewells with Qing Luoyan, and thanked her for the great hospitality shown. Qing Yu followed very closely behind Qing Luoyan's footsteps, and she seemed to be a lot more docile today, not speaking a single word from beginning to end. After Zhuge Xiong and Qing Luoyan exchanged a series of pleasantries, his gaze unconsciously came to rest upon Qing Yu once more, and a reluctance to part immediately surged up in him. "Miss you, Qing. I hope that we'll meet again next time." Qing Yu returned his smile, and it was Qing Luoyan who looked at her with a rather amused look and said, "Guild leader Zhuge will not have to miss her so much. Yu Qing will be accompanying me to the mine-free peak, and you will be able to see her again when the time comes." "Is that really true? Then nothing can be better than that." Zhuge Xiong's face said with joy lighting up his face, before he turned around to leave. Before he left, the unassuming and ordinary-looking man, who had been Zhuge Xiong's side all this time, had suddenly raised his head up to gaze deeply at Qing Yu for a moment, and then turned to follow Zhuge Xiong closely behind in departure. Qing Yu's eyes dimmed briefly, as she watched the slowly disappearing figure. "Has the Dark Overlord left?" Qing Luoyan suddenly turned to look at her, and asked with a faint smile on her lips. Qing Yu composed herself and replied, "Yes. The Dark Overlord said he did not want to see anyone from the Hunters Guild, and went on to leave first." "Huh, that man really does as he pleases wherever he goes, never showing me face as the Temple Lord," Qing Luoyan said with a soft laugh, the expression on her face helpless. With her eyes looking at Qing Yu, she then said with an indiscernible smile on her face, "Yu Qing seems to be quite well acquainted with the Dark Overlord." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qing Yu's eyes glinted sharply for a brief instant, and then said with an emotionless tone, "The Temple Lord must be kidding. I came here all the way from the lower realms. How could I possibly be acquainted with the highly revered Dark Overlord?" "That's quite true." Qing Luoyan lowered her head to look smilingly at her. "But I have never seen him proactively show a liking for anyone before. The way he treats you is rather special, which makes it hard for anyone to not suspect anything. Didn't he also ask me if I will be bringing you to the mine-free peak? Now tell me, doesn't that seem like he cares a lot about you?" Qing Luoyan stretched out a beautiful slender hand, to lift Qing Yu's chin up gently. Studying her face for a moment, Qing Luoyan then said, "This tiny face here is indeed exceptionally exquisite looking. Could it be that our great dark overlord's heart has been moved? Qing Luo Yan's seductive almond-shaped eyes narrowed up sharply, like she was trying to find something from the expression on Qing Yu's face. Unfortunately, she was unable to see anything strange from the young lady's face. Qing Yu then retreated a couple of steps back, and then said with a soft laugh, "If the Dark Overlord's heart can be so easily moved by a mere flesh shell, then the Temple Lord's most outstanding looks would have deprived anyone of any chances in the first place." Chapter 274. 1. Death stare from the future father-in-law. His words were clearly chasing the older man away. Bai Qiu's face darkened and his voice was solemn as he said, "So what is that kid is coming? You mean that I cannot meet him?" Bai Yan's good-looking face sank and looked a little helpless as he said softly, "Actually, it's because Aunt Lan is going to deal with some private matters, and it isn't nice for us to stick our nose in. As outsiders." Knowing his own father only too well, Bai Yan immediately opened his mouth to interject before Bai Qiu even asked him. "Don't ask me what it is about, as I do not know either. But I know that we will be of absolutely no help." Bai Qiu could not help but knit his brows together, thinking that it was probably something highly prickly to deal with, so he did not probe any further. "Sect leader, the Dark Overlord has arrived," a disciple reported as he came walking in from outside. Bai Yan's lips curved up and said, "Bring the guest here." He then hooked his arm around Bai Qiu's shoulder and walked off in another direction as he said, "Didn't you say that you developed several elixir prescriptions the last time that you wanted me to try? We have some time now, so why don't we go see if my father's skills has deteriorated?" "You stinking brat. You're really getting to be so full of yourself. The biggest taboo for an elixir cultivator is impatience and arrogance. Continue being so self-absorbed like this, and you shall surely suffer." Bai Qiu said sullenly, his voice tinged with hints of resentment. All right. I know that already. Can you not already preach to me every time you see me? I am no longer a child, you know." Qing Lan Fei smiled as she watched the two figures slowly depart, a tenderness at the edges of her lips. That father and son pair are so close. Looks like the rumors going around shouldn't be believed. After saying that, she glanced at the man beside her and asked, "Are you getting along well with little Bei? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Ever since they were reunited, Qing Bei's relationship with him had been rather close. Although they have never met before this, but being tied by blood was something strange and amazing, where an invisible link seemed to draw the two of them closer, and they did not feel distant towards each other at all. But it was not known whether it was because every single child born would be naturally reliant on their parents that broke down barriers between them, and as a father figure, one who usually played a strong, stoic and silent existence, it would not be strange for a father and child to find it hard to interact with complete happiness. Seeing her looking at him so curiously, Mo Jingyu laughed softly. "Of course we are getting along swimmingly." "Really?" Qing Lan Fei arched up an eyebrow, the expression on her face filling up with surprise. Mo Jingyu was feeling a little helpless under that suspicious gaze. "Of course it is. He is my own flesh and blood, and even though we've never seen each other before, there is still a certain sense of kinship and closeness between us." Chapter 274. 2. Death stare from the future father-in-law. "That's great," Qing Lan Fei said with a comforted smile. "But I really want to see our little lass, you know? Although I know what she looks like, but I just can't help but miss her." Mo Jingyu's voice seemed to carry a tinge of wistfulness. Qing Lan Fei just could not help herself but to say teasingly, "Looks like it's really true when they say that daughters are their father's lover from their past lives." As Qing Lan Fei said that, the sounds of footsteps suddenly reached their ears. Mo Jingyu subconsciously raised his eyes up to look, and he saw two tall figures slowly approach. A man dressed in white robes was walking in front, and he came to a halt right before the door. He then lowered his head slightly to the man behind him, and took up guard outside, not coming inside. Mo Jingyu's long upslanted eyes narrowed slightly, as he watched the man dressed in a suit of luxurious and noble robes make his way slowly in, and Mo Jingyu could tell with just one glance that he was not a simple man. The exquisite features on his face were dazzling, carrying an air of nonchalance indifference, and seemingly harmless on the surface, but was actually hiding danger and a sharp killer instinct. And that highly unique pair of violet eyes of his were so entrancing, they looked like they would drag people right into a mesmerizing spiral staring right into them, unable to pull themselves out from their depths. Mo Jingyu had looked into those eyes, but he had quickly averted his gaze when he felt a sudden surge rise up in his heart. Those eyes. Why did they give him such a familiar feeling inside? Or did he see them before? When Qing Lanfei saw the man slowly making his way in, the expression on her face turned to look a little flustered for a very brief instant. In her memories, Lu Junyao was a youth who was still a little puerile, untamable, and was highly guarded against everyone. A person that she was able to easily read just by looking at the expression on his face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU here today. That juvenile youth who was a little thin had now become tall and muscular. His facial features blossomed out, which made him look even more handsome and captivating. The lazy and easy nonchalance expression on his face was not hard to see through. Impossible to read his thoughts. He's changed a lot, no matter in terms of his looks or temperament, and it wasn't really a bad thing. June Air. Qing Lanfei's voice was just as gentle as before, as she called out to him. Lu Junyao's footsteps came to a stop right in front of the woman, and seeing that familiar face standing well and alive before him, his eyes sparkled and his heart could not help but rose slightly. His lips then parted slightly as he said, "Aunt Lan, you look just like you were. I have longed for the day that I will be able to see you again for such a long time." Qing Lanfei could not help but feel a twinge in her heart when she heard that. She stretched a hand out and placed it gently on the man's cheek. "June Air, you must have suffered so much over the years." Chapter 274. 3. Death stare from the future father-in-law. As Lu Junyao was a little too tall in stature. Her posture with her head tilted back to touch, and her hand raised up to touch his face looked a little tiring for Qing Lanfei. Seeming to have noticed that, the man lowered his head thoughtfully, to make it easier for the woman to hold his face. As a cold and aloof person, he had just this one person he respected as an elder throughout the world, the only person he was willing to bow his head to. "I do not think that I suffered, but they are just things that one has to undergo on the path to success. Only after having undertaken all kinds of difficulties can one better savor the sweetness after knowing bitterness. That was what you told me before, isn't it?" Lu Junyao curved up his lips and said. Qing Lanfei looked comforted as she nodded her head and replied, "June Air has really grown up, and there isn't the slightest bit of that perverse cold-bloodedness you had in your youth anymore." As she spoke, she then seemed to recall something, quickly stepping back a little. She seemed to have neglected a certain person for a rather long while, and in normal circumstances, he would already have thrown a raging fit. But as there was something important to be dealt with here today, he endured it all without making a sound. "June Air, I was too happy seeing you and forgot to make introductions. This is my husband here. Introductions are not needed, Aunt Lan." Lu Junyao suddenly spoke to interrupt her words, his gaze similarly studying the man before him. "We know each other." "You do?" Qing Lanfei was slightly taken aback, the look on her face one of disbelief. "How did the two of you come to know each other? That doesn't exactly feel right, does it?" Mo Jingyu was already over 700 years old, and Lu Junyao was just slightly over 200. When she came to know Lu Junyao, he was just a kid in his teens, so there was no way Mo Jingyu and him could possibly be acquainted. Did they come to know each other after that? Why hasn't Jingyu mentioned it to her before? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU noticing Qing Lanfei's quizzical gaze directed towards him, Mo Jingyu was also a little bewildered. Although he has heard of this fella's exploits, this was the first time he was meeting the guy. So why is he claiming that they know each other? Seeing that, Lu Junyao could not help having a slightly amused look creep onto his face. "I wonder if your esteemed self still remembers the first mission you accepted, when you became the overlord of the Hell King's palace." The expression on Mo Jingyu's face became slightly surprised as something seemed to flash very briefly through his mind, so fleeting that even Lu Junyao did not catch it. Lu Junyao continued on to say, The top fugitive on Cloud Heaven's most wanted list was said to be an impossible mission, as not a single one of the assassins and bounty hunters that were sent out after him managed to return alive. That top most wanted fugitive back then spread a bout of terror throughout Cloud Heaven for a period, as people were afraid when he would suddenly come out to commit atrocities. Hence the people sought out the Hell King's palace, asking them to come out and help rid them of this cancer. It so happened that your esteemed self had just assumed leadership of the Hell King's palace, and you chose to do it with your own hands, thinking to meet this man to see whether there was any truth in what the rumors say for yourself. Chapter 274. 4. Death stare. From the future father-in-law having spoken up to that point, Mo Jingyu then seemed to remember it in that instant, his long upslanted eyes widening in incredulity. I remember now. That person. Don't tell me it's you. No wonder he had found the kid's eyes to be so familiar. In a manner of speaking, they did know each other, and had even traded blows before. But as that had happened at night, and the kid had been masked, he had not seen what the kid looked like. But there was probably only just one pair of those violet eyes he had throughout the entire Cloud Heaven. Although he had not seen anything else besides that pair of eyes, he could still remember that his opponent's cultivation had been inhumanly powerful. It was completely unlike any power that an ordinary person could possibly possess, and it had surprised him quite a bit. Not only was he the most highly skilled in the barbarian tribe, besides the old freaks who had lived for several thousand years, people who possessed a higher level of cultivation than him could be counted on less than one hand. But that person had not been disadvantaged at all when they exchanged blows. He finally understood why those people who had sought to take the kid's life have ended up giving up their own lives instead. He could only say that it came as no surprise that they were now all dead, because this kid here possessed true power. But who could ever have thought that such a powerful pugilist was actually just a young youth? If word of this got out, no one would believe it at all. The expression on Mo Jingyu's face went through a series of unfathomable changes, and it could only be said to be highly interesting to watch. In contrast, Lu Junyao's face was one of calm, and as the many emotions surged through Mo Jingyu, he had already come to sit down on the other side of Qing Lanfei. So the two of you are really already acquainted, Qing Lanfei said as she looked at the two men, and then shook her head as she laughed. I was thinking that I should introduce the two of you, but it looks that I do not need to. I had not known that you've known each other from such a long time ago. There must be some sort of affinity here. There must be some kind of affinity at work. Aunt Lan should have met Qingbei already, haven't you? Lu Junyao asked with a smile. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yes, I have. That boy is very obedient, and I heard that he had been under your care all this while. I am very grateful to you, Qing Lanfei said with gratitude in her eyes. Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow and his tone of voice was a little miffed as he said, For Aunt Lan to be so polite and courteous to me, it makes it look like we've grown distant. I have always seen you to be an elder I respected greatly, and taking care of them is something well within my powers. And it's also something I wanted to do. Qing Lanfei was just about to say something in response when she heard Mo Jingyu laugh out loud scoffingly, and then opened his mouth to say, Wouldn't you say the way you took care of them has gone a little overboard? Lu Junyao's eyes flashed with a glint, looking like he had already guessed what the man was going to say. As expected, the man's voice was deep and gloomy as he said in the very next second, I heard from the Divine Healer's sex young lord that you and Qingyu are an item. Chapter 275. 1. A mysterious love token. Once those words came out, a moment of silence fell onto the scene. The voice of Qing Lanfei, who had been conversing with Lu Junyao, also trailed off unconsciously. She felt that the atmosphere didn't feel quite right. Moreover, that question was really quite awkward. Although she had always liked the child June heir, despite the unfortunate and trying events surrounding his birth had caused his personality to change greatly, the fact that he had always remembered her as an elder for so many years, it could be seen that he could not possibly be all that bad at heart. But Jingyu did not know him well, and must surely detest this child. After all, his reputation really wasn't great. Qing Lanfei's face looked rather conflicted, hesitating as she watched the two men with a measuring gaze without saying a word for a moment. She then moved her lips slightly, like she wanted to say something to diffuse the tense atmosphere. However, she heard at the very next moment Lu Junyao open his mouth to say, "That's right, we've been together for a very long time." Mo Jingyu's face darkened slightly. "Did you beguile her with your charm?" Although this man was not that likable, but that handsome-looking flesh shell of his really had nothing for him to pick on. He himself had been deemed to be the most good-looking man in Cloud Heaven in the past, and his looks had been so captivating that even women felt inferior next to him. So it could be seen that he was really confident of his own looks. But with this man in front of him, he could not deny that the man's looks were in no way inferior to his own. Hence, Mo Jingyu was certain that he must have seduced Qingyu with his charming good looks. But Lu Junyao's response caused rage to further rise up inside Mo Jingyu a few notches. Lu Junyao was then seen raising an eyebrow, and then reaching his hand up to his forehead in helplessness as he laughed softly. "Aren't you thinking too highly of me here? If I am able to beguile and charm her, I would have brought her back to the dark lands, and keep her under my watch every day. Why would I want to let her continue to cause my heart so much pain like this?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The helpless tone of his voice that sounded so doting and indulgent caused Qing Lan Fei to smile through tightly pressed lips, unable to help herself. But the shade on Mo Jingyu's face turned even uglier. "Huh? You mean to say that it was my daughter who came onto you first?" Mo Jingyu's voice was already carrying a faint hint of almost irrepressible murder. The edges of Lu Junyao's lips lifted slightly, and his eyes narrowed slightly, as his long slender finger started toying with a uniquely shaped ring on his ring finger. The expression on his face looking tender and affectionate, like he was thinking of the person he loved so deeply. The man's finger was fair and slender. Accompanied by the red ring, it stood out against the flawlessly smooth skin, a stunningly beautiful sight. Looking at it more closely, the color of the stone of the ring was of a highly exquisite grade, red jade that was exceptionally clear and free of impurities, carefully and intricately carved. Chapter 275. 2. A mysterious love token. Red jade was highly treasured among jade stones, and it was rare to find jade roughs as large as one's palm, where stones like this would usually be carved into larger ornaments like headpieces. Something so small like a ring would really be such a great waste of materials that craftsmen would usually not choose to carve the stones into that. Not only would it become such a small item, but it would require tedious and intricate work. Besides it being a waste of time and effort, red jade that was carved into just the size of a thumbnail would have wasted a large amount of gold as well. The reason Lu Junyao was staring at the ring with a strange look in his eyes was for no other reason than the fact that it was the love token he had received from Qingyu. Although she had given him quite a number of things before in the past, but they had all just been bottles of different elixirs and medicine. This ring was something she had given to him not too long ago, and besides it being an amazing spirit artifact, it was also her love token at the same time. He had been so happy back then that he did not want to even shut his eyes at all, staring at the most precious treasure he wore on his finger all the time, like he was afraid that someone might steal it from him. Qingyu scolded him for being so foolish when she came to know about it, and told him that the ring has its own consciousness. It was able to identify its master when a person wore it on his finger, and no one except for its master would be able to remove it. His mind was set at ease after that, but he still could not bear to remove it, flaunting it everywhere he went, almost like he was afraid that people would not notice it. That ring was one among a pair, and Qingyu had the other one, but she had always worn it hung from a string made from a special kind of material, never revealing it to anyone before. She had been carrying the pair of rings on her since her previous life, and after she failed to survive through her tribulation, which brought her to this other world, she came to discover by accident that this pair of rings were still lying safe and sound inside her personal dimensional space. She had then taken the rings out and carried them on her person since, as it had become a habit she had kept for so many years, almost as if it was her lucky charm that would make her feel uncomfortable if she did not have it on her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, but she never knew what true use those unique-looking rings really had, and she had never once given it a thought in her previous life. But it was after she gave one of them to Lu Junyao that she accidentally came to discover that they acted very similarly to the modern communication devices from the world in her previous life. There was an invisible fingerprint activation switch on the inside of the ring, and one would only need to touch it to communicate with the person on the other end. It was also able to shoot out a mini projection that would show the other party's face, which was really amazing. Besides that function, she had not discovered anything else for now, but just that one thing had surprised her greatly, and she had been shocked for a long time before she was able to regain her composure. Chapter 275. 3. A mysterious love token, and she had also discovered another advantage. The ring's function was not affected by interference from barriers or shields. It was on a completely different level with the communication crystal ball that Lu Junyao had given her, an absolutely divine artifact with heaven-defying capability. It was clear from here that though the two of them were not together at that moment, they were still able to contact each other at any time through the rings. It was at this moment that Lu Junyao's finger unconsciously came to stroke the ring's surface, and the ring suddenly quivered slightly, its exterior becoming a little more translucent looking. On the other end, Lu Junyao was just seen remaining silent, not saying a single word, but was just toying with the ring with his head lowered, looking like he had not noticed her at all. The rage in Mo Jingyu's heart boiled up, and he was just about to throw a fit when a voice suddenly rang out unexpectedly, seemingly out of nowhere, which caused Mo Jingyu to freeze in his spot stunned. It was a young woman's voice, and in that clear melodious voice, it carried a faint alluring aloof tinge, which tugged at a person's heart. "Ah Yao, have you gone back yet?" Hearing the young lady's voice, the smile at the ends of Lu Junyao's lips immediately softened, and he came to reply in a gentle voice. I'm at the Divine Healer's sect." Both Qing Lanfei and Mo Jingyu widened their eyes, staring frozenly as they watched Lu Junyao speak gently to his finger. To be more exact, he was speaking tenderly to the ring on his finger. And the other voice seemed to have come out from that ring as well. A young woman's voice. Could it be? The same thought then seemed to strike the couple's minds at that moment, and the two of them unconsciously came to hold their breath. "You went to the Divine Healer's sect? Are you there to see little Belle? Are my father and mother good and well?" Hearing the continuous string of questions from the young lady, the couple could almost be certain that that voice undoubtedly belonged to their daughter. Lu Junyao then glanced at the two anxious-faced people with an imperceptible smile on his face, and went on to reply. They're doing great. I came here today to visit Aunt Lan and read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He raised his eyes up to look at Mo Jingyu, the smile at the end of his lips deepening slightly. My future father-in-law. Those words quickly succeeded in turning Mo Jingyu's face to become dark as ink. However, the delighted tinkle of the young lady's laugh came to sound out from the other side. Let me guess, could my father possibly be right beside you? Aren't you afraid that he'll hit you saying such things so freely? Lu Junyao blinked his eyes innocently, purposely turning his eyes away from someone's terrifying-looking face, and said in a slightly aggrieved voice, "Did I say anything wrong? If your father is not my father-in-law, does that mean you're going to dump me? That's enough out of you, acting all pitiful again. If I were to dump you, which other woman would be able to withstand that outrageous temperament of yours?" Qingyu said teasingly on the other side. Chapter 275. 4. A mysterious love token. Hearing how familiar the two of them sounded to each other as they talked, Mo Jingyu's face inadvertently turned glum. Looks like things were completely different from what he had thought before. Seeing how his daughter was, she did not look like she had been deceived, bewitched or held under threat. It was clear that she genuinely liked the kid. "Ah Yao, are both my father and mother beside you? I want to see them," Qingyu said in a soft voice suddenly. Lu Junyao raised his eyes to look at Qing Lanfei, seemingly seeking her opinion on that. A glint flashed in Qing Lanfei's eyes as she calmed the surge of emotions inside, before she then nodded her head. Seeing that, Lu Junyao then pushed the switch at the back of the ring with a finger, and a dim red light screen suddenly lit up before their eyes, showing the image of a captivating young lady with a flawless beauty countenance inside. Qing Lanfei and Mo Jingyu were both stunned and frozen in shock for a moment, unable to believe their eyes. To think that they were actually able to see Qingyu appear right before them like this. As the two of them were still staring in disbelief, the young lady who had remained still and unmoving suddenly tilted her head to one side, and her face broke into a beautiful smile as she said in a gentle voice, "Father, mother, I am Qingyu. I am glad to see the two of you." Meeting for the first time like this was something they had never imagined. It was thought that there wouldn't be another family under these heavens where the parents could become separated from their own flesh and blood without them having seen each other before, and were greeting each other like strangers who were meeting for the first time like this. Many people have said that Qingyu looked very much like her mother. Indeed, besides the alluringly beautiful pair of phoenix-like eyes, her other facial features looked 70 to 80% alike to Qing Lanfei's, and if she tried to, it wouldn't be hard for Qingyu to pass off as her mother. Seeing that face that looked so much like her appear at that moment, and earnestly calling her mother, Qing Lanfei's heart just could not wrench up any further, the surge of emotions rising up inside stronger than the first time she saw Qing Bei. Little Yu. Seeming to have detected the woman's grief and sadness, Qingyu quickly opened her mouth to say, "Don't be sad, mother. I am doing well and completely fine. Ayao has always been protecting me." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qing Lanfei held in her tears and tried get best to put on a smile to say, "That's great. It's good as long as you're alright." Qingyu's gaze then turned towards the quiet and silent figure at the side, to look at Mo Jingyu, who seemed like he wanted to say something, but still had not said a single word. Her eyes curved up into smiling crescents and she said, "Father is indeed as outstandingly good-looking as I imagined. No wonder you were able to get the Bright Moon Temple's Temple Lord to be so smitten with you for several hundred years." The rather sullen and depressing atmosphere was immediately broken by Qingyu's words. The expression on Mo Jingyu's face changed and Qing Lanfei immediately forgot her grief for an instant. Her gaze sharpened slightly and she began, "How did you? That was a secret that not many knew anymore. Did Lu Junyao tell her about it?" Chapter 276. 1. It's enough I know how good my beloved is if possible. Qing Lanfei did not wish for her children to be dragged into the previous generation's grievances. Seeing the grave expressions on the couple's faces, Qingyu arched up an eyebrow and glanced at Lu Junyao. She then started to say, pausing between each and every word, "I apologize as what I am about to say next might come as a shock, but you really do not have to be worried at all. I am here in the Bright Moon Temple at this moment, and everything I know about Father was told to me by that woman." Her words said in a light casual tone however caused Qing Lanfei's face to immediately turn pale, and her irises to enlarge. With a look of horror, she then exclaimed, "What did you just say?" Qingyu seemed to have expected that they would react strongly, and she gave a helpless sigh before she said, "Ayao, why don't you tell them instead?" Lu Junyao nodded slightly, and then said in a reassuring voice, "Aunt Lan, you do not need to be so worried. Things are not as bad you imagine." Qingyu was unexpectedly taken away by people from the Divine Temple. Qing Luolan isn't aware of her identity at all, and has come to trust her completely. Pure absolute nonsense. Mo Jingyu was so enraged his eyes had turned red. He stared at the young lady on the tiny screen, and said in helpless exasperation, "How can you possibly continue to remain in such a dangerous place? Do you know how terrifying that woman is? The instant she discovers you're our daughter, she will not hesitate to have you killed." It was the first time Qingyu was admonished so sternly, and it had come from her father. But she did not feel aggrieved in the slightest, but instead thought that it was a rather refreshing feeling. Qingyu laughed and then said, "You're worrying for nothing. She has actually been suspicious of my identity, right from the very first day." The moment those words came out, the expression on Mo Jingyu's face constricted. The young lady was then heard saying, "But despite all her suspicions without any concrete proof, she would not really do anything to me. Moreover, she is no longer suspicious of me, because she can no longer be parted from me. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu then briefly told them about Qing Luoyan's insomnia, and how she was being plagued by nightmares. So, you do not have to worry about me. I just want to take back the things that belongs to mother, and you can take it as my greeting gift to you for being reunited at last. Qingyu said with an earnest and sincere smile on her face. My foolish girl, these things should not have fallen onto you at all. Qing Lanfei's eyes were red around the rims as she said, the emotions she felt inside growing more conflicted. I haven't been doing this alone. Ayao has been helping me. Mother can rest assured. Qingyu said to her mother. With everything clearly explained, Qing Lanfei then remembered that there was one more thing she had yet to ask about. Chapter 276. 2. It's enough I know how good my beloved is. Her gaze lingered upon Lu Junyao for a while before she asked hesitatingly, Little you, how did you and June air? Although she did not object to these two young ones, but she was still a little surprised. What kind of affinity came to make the two of them meet, and even brought them together? When Qing Lanfei's words came out, Mo Jingyu's expression grew stern. After all, he did not think too well of this man of mysterious and unknown origins, who was eyeing his precious daughter. Hearing that, Qingyu could not help but glance at the man who was looking at her a little anxiously before she smiled and said, The two of us are mutually attracted to each other, and are truly in love. When Mo Jingyu heard that, his brows creased together, and he was just about to open his mouth to say something when the young lady's gentle voice interrupted him. Father, I hope you will not object to the two of us. I know that the outside world does not think very well of Ayao, but no matter how bloodthirsty he becomes, and thinks nothing of killing a person, he would never ever hurt me. He loves me more than he loves himself, and that is enough for me. Qingyu spoke slowly and surely, emphasizing each word with firm resolve. Lu Junyao's heart beat more quickly from the young lady's words. He knew that was because of the joy and delight his heart was feeling. The little fox was acknowledging him so bravely in front of her own parents, which just makes him love her so much more. When Mo Jingyu heard Qingyu's words, the look on his face did not look too pretty. He scoffed coldly and said, How many years old are you? You do not know a thing about love at all. If I come to find out that he is not true to you in future. Father, love is defined by one's age. Who said a young person would not understand what love is? That is because people always judge young people from their own adult perspective. Can you not impose those same doubts onto me as an elder? There was still a smile on the ends of Qingyu's lips, but it could clearly be felt that her mood had changed a little. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The words she was saying to Mo Jingyu were not entirely delightful. Seeing that the daughter he had missed so much confront him because of an outsider, it was not possible that Mo Jingyu would not feel aggrieved or sad inside. Qingyu on the other side seemed to have noticed that as well, and that her manner of speech had deviated a little. She was silent for a moment before she opened her mouth to say again, Father, do you know? Ayao has a unique body constitution, which makes it very hard for his wounds to heal whenever he gets hurt. Bleeding might not mean much to normal people, but to him, a single cut could possibly cost him his life. But he has still gone on to lose a lot of his blood because of me before. If he did not truly love me, what kind of use would I possibly be to him, that makes it worth it for him to risk his life for me like that? The time it had moved her the most was when all her meridians had froze up and her life had been in grave danger. Chapter 276. 3. It's enough I know how good my beloved is. The fool had really gone on to believe little Burrow's words, and transfused his own blood into her, just to melt away the icy chill inside her. She had fallen into a deep coma at that time, and her body had instinctively absorbed that source of warmth. How could she have known that it was actually his blood? And if she had not regained consciousness quickly, he would really have died from having his blood completely depleted. But even though his body's strength was giving out, he still did not let go of her hand. It was because he was afraid that the moment he gave up, she might really never be able to wake up again. and her heart had been greatly moved by him back at that time. A man who was usually seen to be so cold-blooded and haughty was being so nice to her, never once refusing her requests, even when he was being thoroughly used with nothing to gain at all, willing to let his own body come to harm for her sake. How could she possibly not love him for that? Hence it is said that love is a strange and amazing thing. Love just happens, and it does not need a reason for it to occur. So what if everyone did not agree with her? It was about the person she liked, and it's enough that she alone knows how good he is. In regards to Lu Junyao's unique body constitution, besides Bai Ziyan, who was always by the man's side, only a few others who were on closer terms to him in the Dark Lands knew about it. And Qingyu had discovered that fact because she was firstly an elixir cultivator, who would be more sensitive than others with such things, and also because she possessed stronger powers of observation. On the other hand, there were also a few times when she saw him suffer some superficial wounds. His face had turned abnormally pale. It was only later that she found out about rare condition in his body. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The moment a wound appears on his body, his blood would surge out like flood waters through an open dam, its flow unstoppable, and would only dissipate when his body starts to show signs of failure. After Qingyu came to know about that, she reacted just like Bai Ziyan and the others, taking great care to not let that fella get hurt, as seeing how weak and frail he looked every time that happened in the past had pained her heart greatly. Hearing the young lady say those words with such a serious expression on her face, even Qinglan Fei was a little surprised, seemingly unable to believe what she just heard. Because even she had not known that Lu Junyao had a constitution that was so prone to excessive bleeding as in her mind. The child had always been very strong and resilient, and she had never seen him get hurt. Back when he annihilated the entire clan of his enemies where rivers of blood ran and dead bodies piled up all around, his entire body had been stained red with blood. But not a single drop of all that blood had come from him, and it was thought he must have fought with his very life to not let himself get wounded, which would have greatly impeded his battle prowess. Chapter 276. 4. It's enough I know how good my beloved is, and to him, that unique body constitution of his was a deadly weakness, a secret that he cannot let people know about. But he had voluntarily revealed that weakness that could possibly cost him to lose his life to Qingyu, which was as good as placing his life into his hands. So if he did not genuinely love her, what other motive could he have? Mo Jingyu did not say anything more after hearing that. But even if he knew that this fella had no ulterior motive, the fella had still snatched his daughter away, and turned his daughter's heart towards outsiders, which made Mo Jingyu unable to help himself, but feel a little aggrieved. Qinglan Fei was usually able to read his mind, and she was naturally able to understand what the man was thinking. She then said reassuringly in a soft, soothing voice, "The children have grown up, and we should let them deal with their own affairs. Moreover, I think June Air is indeed quite a good choice, and the most important thing is that he likes little you. Are you really going to be the strict father who breaks up a couple of lovebirds immediately after being reunited with your daughter?" Feeling helpless, Mo Jingyu let out a sigh. "Fine, I'll just not bother." After he said that, he still gave Lu Junyao, who had not said a word all this time, a baleful glare. "Thank you, Daddy. I just knew you'll be understanding." Upon seeing that, the young lady on the screen showed a sweet smile on her face, and she had even addressed him more affectionately as Daddy instead of using father, which sounded slightly distant. Her gentle and melodious voice caused Mo Jingyu to be dazed for a moment, almost like he had been caught off guard, and was stunned by surprise. Lu Junyao could not help but gave Qingyu a highly doting glance. Why does it seem as though the little fox has something up her sleeve? That pitiful man has unknowingly fallen into her trap, and hasn't even realized it. Seeing the little fox wreck her brain, so much to try to make that person accept him, she was really rather adorable. At that moment, someone over on Qingyu's side seemed to have come, and her eyes quickly turned away for a moment before she then said to them, "I have something I need to go do now. Can't talk anymore. Daddy, Mother, please take care. Rest assured, I'm here to ensure that After Lu Junyao finished saying that, the mini image on the screen was then automatically cut off. Qing Lanfei then said a little worriedly, "Will little you really be fine there in the Bright Moon Temple?" Lu Junyao shook his head and laughed. "She is very smart and intelligent. Qing Luo Yin will not discover anything." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, I hope that will be the case. Having seen Qing Yu, it could be said that Qing Lanfei already had one of her wishes granted. But she still had not forgotten that she had even more important things waiting for her. Qing Lanfei's eyes lowered, hiding the emotions inside that might come to show. When she raised them up again, her eyes were sparkling clear. She turned to look at Lu Junyao and said slowly, "June Heir, I need to ask for your help in a particular matter. Aunt Lan can be candid with me. Do you still need to be so polite with me?" Lu Junyao asked the woman. "I would like to ask you to protect Qing Yu and Qing Bei, and to keep them safe no matter what." Chapter 277. 1. I do not mean anything to you at all. Angry. Those words carried a heavy tint of earnest and sincere plea. Lu Junyao was a little surprised. He had naturally detected the underlying meaning behind Qing Lanfei's words. It sounded like she was going to leave, and would never come back anymore. Seeing that he did not respond, Qing Lanfei's gaze dimmed as he looked at the man and continued to say, "Promise me, you have to protect them no matter what. And you must not let them go to the mine-free peak." "Why?" Lu Junyao quizzed puzzledly, his brows creased up. When he had returned from the Divine Temple, he had heard Qing Luo Yin say that she would be bringing Qing Yu along with her to the mine-free peak. But why was Aunt Lan objecting to it here? Looking into his puzzled eyes, Qing Lanfei did not explain much, but merely said with a conflicted look in her eyes, "That place is actually not as good as what people out there are claiming it to be. Instead, it is a place that could turn out to be the final resting place for some people." Although Lu Junyao did not really fully understand what she meant, but he was still able to roughly grasp what she was trying to say, that the place was in reality highly dangerous, and she was worried that Qing Yu might come to meet with harm. The mine-free peak manifests only once in 1,000 years, presenting a very rare opportunity, and there is a limited number of spots. Anyone who misses the chance will need to wait a whole 1,000 years. Aunt Lan, Qing Yu will definitely want to go there, but don't worry, I will not let anything happen to her. You do not understand. Qing Lanfei shook her head, and the expression on her face turned rather grave. "June Heir, there are certain things that I might not be able to explain too clearly to you right now. But one thing I can tell you with great certainty is that Qing Yu and Qing Bei must absolutely not go to the mine-free peak. Not only are they not to go there, you must hide them properly. Best that they can be hidden in a covert location that is shut off from the rest of the world." At that moment, no matter how dense any could be, it was impossible for Lu Junyao to not detect the nervousness and severity that Qing Lanfei felt towards the matter. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It seemed like Aunt Lan was not only worried about Qing Yu and Qing Bei's safety alone. Her tone seemed to be trying to say that they were in great danger, and that it had something to do with some secret that was linked to the Ming-free peak, which meant nothing but certain death if they went to that place. The indifference on his face faded slightly as his gaze turned to glance at Mo Jingyu, and he saw that the expression on the man's face looked a little gloomy. Although he had remained silent and not said anything, but the fist placed on his knee had been clenched up tightly all this while, not loosening a moment. It could be seen that he was highly tensed up, and his face had turned slightly pale with helplessness. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Lu Junyao hesitated for a moment before he opened his mouth to say, "What is that you are unable to tell me? Maybe I could be able to offer some help?" Chapter 277. 2. I do not mean anything to you at all. Angry. Qing Lanfei's gaze was tender as she smiled at him and said, "Protecting them and keeping them safe will be the greatest help to me." Upon hearing that, Lu Junyao did not probe any further. He lifted his head up and said, "Rest assured that I will find a chance to speak to Qing Yu about the mine-free peak. They will not go to that place, and nothing will happen to them. Since Aunt Lon was not willing to talk about it, he could only look into it himself. He would find out what it is that she was trying to hide. Since it concerned Qing Yu's personal safety, he could not possibly leave it alone. Lu Junyao did not remain there for long after that, leaving the place after speaking with Qing Lanfei for a little while more. Waiting till the man was really gone, Mo Jingyu then opened his mouth to say in a low voice, "Why do you trust him so much? Even if he is really a little capable, will he really be able to ensure the safety of our two children?" Qing Lanfei's gaze turned around from the door. She sighed slightly before she said, "Jingyu, I can only place my hopes upon Jun Er now. If even he is unable to keep little Yu and little Bei safe, then no one else would be able to protect them. Does he really have what it takes?" Mo Jingyu's brows knitted together. Isn't she thinking a little too highly of that man Lu Junyao? There's quite a good number of highly skilled pugilists in Cloud Heaven, and how old is that kid only? Can he really be stronger than those old ancient freaks, who are already a few thousand years old? Qing Lanfei looked at him with a meaningful gaze, and then slowly went on to say, "If you're speaking purely about depth of cultivation, then I do not think that anyone in Cloud Heaven can surpass him. That child was able to not trade several blows with you, and not be disadvantaged when he was just in his teens, and that was not just due to his gifted talent alone. There was a great big secret behind that child's birth." On another side, the Hunters Guild, Zhuge Xiong suddenly found himself in the mood, and he shut himself in his study for the better part of the day. It was not till the sun hung low over the horizon that he stretched his back and pulled the doors open. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He peered up to see the color of the sky, and then ordered the servant to bring his dinner to the study, before turning around to go back inside. The moment he turned around, he was surprised to see a man leaning back in the chair that he had occupied just a moment ago. The man had his chin cupped nonchalantly in the palm of his hand, his eyes gazing appraisingly at the fine parchment he held in his other hand, its ink still a little wet. Zhuge Xiong jumped up in shock before he walked over quickly to the table, his voice a little flustered as he said, "Hurry up and put my precious treasure down. What if you come to damage it?" Hearing that, the man glanced expressionlessly at him, and then put the piece of fine parchment back down onto the table slowly. A slender and petite-figured young lady in a pink dress was depicted on the parchment, her facial features exquisitely beautiful, but the expression on her face was a little cold and aloof. The slight anger captured in those brows in the portrait was highly lifelike, which made that slightly cold countenance a little more lively. Chapter 277. 3. I do not mean anything to you at all. Angry, Zhuge Xiong turned out to be a very good painter, where even the pair of eyes that were most striking portrayed the emotions fully, looking extremely lifelike. And on that painting, who else could it be other than Qing Yu herself? It was as if Zhuge Xiong had been poisoned, unable to stop thinking of her the entire time since he came back. It was not until he had completed portraying her in a portrait that he felt a little comforted. Upon seeing the man put the painting back down, Zhuge Xiong was then able to breathe a sigh of relief. He stretched his hand out, and was just about to keep the painting away, when a large hand with well-defined bones suddenly pressed down on his. "This portrait you painted, who is it?" Zhuge Xiong was taken aback for a moment, thinking that the man was interested in the young lady as well. His voice immediately became wary as he said, "Why would you suddenly ask me about something like this? I had an old friend, who looks very much like the woman in the painting. I was just trying to ascertain if they are the same person," the man said. Hearing those words, Zhuge Xiong then relaxed his guard, and opened his mouth to explain. "Then you have definitely mistaken her for someone else. This little beauty here is Qing Luoyan's personal attendant, and her real person is even more beautiful than this painting. But her temperament isn't really great, I must say. It seems like Qing Luoyan is very indulgent with her, and must have spoilt her rotten. But that kind of a personality can be said to be rather flavorful in another way." The man's interest seemed piqued as he arched up an eyebrow. "What is her name?" "She's called Yu Qing, a rather nice-sounding name." Zhuge Xiong chuckled and said, "Yu Qing, The corners of the man's lips curved up as he repeated that name. I must say it's quite a coincidence. He had been wondering all this time how that person had suddenly disappeared without a trace anywhere. So she had been hiding here all along. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Zhuge Xiong was not paying attention to what the man was saying, but was carefully awaiting the ink on the portrait to dry completely. He then rolled it up gingerly before he placed it high up onto the shelf, and then turned to say to the man, "What made you come all the way here to look for me?" "It's nothing, but just wanted to tell you that I will be going with you on the trip to the mine-free peak," the man said with a smile. Zhuge Xiong raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you say that you were not going, and would just be getting that subordinate of yours to go in your stead? Why have you suddenly changed your mind?" The smile at the ends of the man's lips deepened slightly. "Because I discovered something very interesting. So I think the situation needs me to personally show my face there." Zhuge Xiong's shoulders shrugged indifferently. "Whatever pleases you. Anyway, we've agreed that when we get our hands on the prize, we'll split it 50-50. If you go back on your word, our cooperation will come to an end, and you will then be placed on the Hunters Guild's most wanted list." Chapter 277. 4. I do not mean anything to you at all. Angry. Relax. I never go back on my word, the man said with a laugh. Bright Moon Divine Temple. Qingyu sat cross-legged on the cloud bed, her eyes softly shut, in a meditative trance. After coming here to the Divine Temple, because the spirit energy in the air here was a lot more robust than in the lower realms, the speed her cultivation advanced at was extremely fast, which brought her sacred soul burial arts to rise from the 6th level up into the 8th level, and would soon attain the 9th level, to restore her powers to the level she possessed at her peak in her previous life. As she grew stronger, her weapon's spirit fell into a deep sleep once again, and it was not known how long he would sleep before awakening this time. The Heavenly Insights into Medicine had about 20 over pages in total, and the red short-limbed little figure in there had also grown by quite a bit. In the recent period that little Burrow had been sleeping, the little toddler had been accompanying her all that time. Seeing that Qingyu had come into the dimension in her meditative trance, the little toddler was naturally able to see her as well. He circled around Qingyu happily again and again, till Qingyu became vexed and pushed him away, thinking why little Burrow had not been so sticky back when he was a lot smaller, but this little thing here was sticky as glue. Being pushed away by Qingyu so hard-heartedly, the little toddler did not get angry, but just pouted his lips. "Mistress, you are so biased. Why do you like that snake so much but push me away all the time? Little Burrow is my weapon spirit, and he grew up together with me, so it is natural that I share a deeper relationship with him." Qingyu then paused for a moment at that moment, her eyes glancing at the little toddler for a moment. "As for you, I do not know you that well. Mistress, I clearly grew up together with you as well, you know, but you only had eyes for that snake and never even saw me." Seeing the little thing almost hopping mad like she had done something atrocious to let him down, Qingyu could not help but arch up an eyebrow in surprise. "Why is it that I do not remember you?" She remembers that the little thing seems to have said that he was the Heavenly Insights into Medicine's book spirit, a little spirit from that book, but she really did not have the slightest impression, not remembering having ever seen him in both lives, past and present. "Mistress, please think carefully. You really do not remember even a single bit." Qingyu shook her head, feeling a little helpless. Seeing that, the little toddler's eyes widened as he stared. With a wave of his tiny arm, the large and massive tome, that was the Heavenly Insights of Medicine, fell heavily onto the ground before her. Pointing a finger at its cover, the little thing asked, "Doesn't Mistress feel that something is a little different somewhere?" Qingyu turned her gaze to where his little finger was pointing and peered carefully at the tome, but did not discover anything, until her gaze passed fleetingly over a particular spot which made her freeze. "Wait a minute. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This spot here." She ran her slender finger over the complicated design over the book's cover. There was a spot that was sunken in, where she knew a strange and unique seed was originally embedded. It was thought that it had always been there, since the heavenly insights of medicine had existed. No one knew what that was, and it was impossible to take it out, looking like it grew out from there. But now, the seed is missing. Chapter 278. 1. The little thing who was asking for it, she had not really paid much attention to it. The seed. Where did it go? Qingyu was still feeling puzzled when her gaze slowly turned to look at the little red toddler. She reeled back in shock like she had just thought of something, and then blinked her eyes incredulously. You. The little toddler's large eyes looked back at her as his head nodded slowly. His voice delighted as he said, That's right, that's right. I am that little seed. Mistress finally remembers me. It all suddenly dawned upon Qingyu. It seemed like she had come to realize when that seed had gone missing, and understood why the little thing was being so angry, that she did not remember him. Because he had only been a living creature that did not have its own body, no mouth to speak with, but possessed its own consciousness to understand the words she said, and had been able to respond to her. Every time that she interacted with little Burrow in the past, the little thing had actually always appeared, seemingly trying to attract her attention, and she had always been rather amused, comforting the little thing a little. Back then, Qingyu had just thought that he was just a strange and mysterious little sprite. But after she underwent her tribulation and died, the little thing had disappeared. Thinking about that, Qingyu could not help but look at the little toddler in surprise. When, did you come to grow yourself a body? I just grew up and would naturally grow myself a body. I only had my spirit consciousness before, and the spirit energy I absorbed was thin and weak. Hence my cultivation advanced very slowly. That is why I look so strange now. The little toddler seemed a little embarrassed as it said with his head hung low. Qingyu nodded her head with a smile. I see. But what kind of a species are you really? A flower? Weed? She remembered that he had been a seed, but she really did not have any idea what kind of a seed he was. I am most definitely not such a lowly being like a common plant or whatnot. The little toddler pouted his lips in indignation. Then what are you? Qingyu asked with an upraised eyebrow. The little toddler blinked his eyes, and then puffed his chest up with pride. I am a Earthfire Devil Vine. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Earthfire Devil Vine? It was said to be a strange and unique plant that grew among the lava at the world's core. Its life force highly tenacious and resilient, and does not die easily. They fed on lava and hence had strong and sturdy bodies. If their long vines lashed out and whipped on a person's body, it would inflict indescribably excruciating pain. It was called the devil vine because though the earth-fired devil vine itself was a docile kind of plant, but when it came into contact with human bloodstream, it would undergo a ferocious transformation to gain terrifyingly destructive powers. Because it was such an evil and devilish plant, when it was first discovered that the earth-fire devil vine had such an unstable and violent characteristic, it was fully eradicated and rooted out completely by people. Otherwise, at the wild and ferocious rate it was able to propagate, and its propensity to attack and slaughter humans if it drank blood, heavens knew what kind of a terror they would have brought. Chapter 278. 2. The little thing who is asking for it. And the reason Qingyu knew his name was because she once read in the Heavenly Insights of Medicine about a kind of hallucinogen that causes a person's mind to become fuzzy and their emotions to turn explosively violent. In that prescription formula, it seemed that one of the herbs mentioned was the earth-fire devil vine. She had not thought that the little thing would be able to concoct medicine as well. Those thoughts were on Qingyu's mind as she looked into the eyes of the small creature before her. And an evil glint soon crept into her eyes. The little toddler could not help but feel a chill run up his spine, and he shifted his feet to move to one side. Mistress, why are you looking at me like that? It's nothing. I just thought that you looked rather adorable, Qingyu said smilingly, and then suddenly seemed to have thought of something. She arched up an eyebrow and then asked the little thing, Aren't you that seed embedded in the Heavenly Insights of Medicine? How did you become its book spirit as well? The little toddler sat itself down on the floor as it shook its big round head, its face aggrieved as it began to say with a helpless sigh, I am originally a book spirit, but I was trapped inside that seed and could not get out from there. Time passed and year after year went by. I ended waiting in there for a whole 3,000 years, watching the heavenly insights into medicine being handed down from one generation to the next. But no one ever noticed my existence, and even used me. Speaking up till that point, the little toddler became highly agitated, his eyes filling up with endless aggrievement and sadness. Even used me as a decorative ornament. When Qingyu heard that, she could not help but burst out laughing. But seeing how angry the little toddler was, she quickly suppressed it down. Better not add salt to his wounds. That wouldn't be very nice. But in the end, I was finally able to meet you, my mistress. You were the one who enabled me to be able to break out from imprisonment, to regain my freedom. Qingyu was a little bewildered. Me? She did not remember having done anything. Does mistress remember how you accidentally cut your finger on the seat I was in? It is because I drank mistress' blood that I was able to break out from imprisonment. Her blood? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Isn't it said that the earth fire devil vine would go berserk and transform after drinking human blood? Qingyu asked in surprise. Has mistress forgotten that you are descended from an extremely rare and the purest bloodline? Not only did mistress' blood prevent me from going through a violent transformation, it even cleansed away the devilry in my body. The little toddler smiled and explained. Qingyu nodded her head in understanding as she looked down at her hands. Her blood was really something. No wonder she had always attracted so many strange things ever since she was very young. Little thing, when do you think little Burrow will be able to wake up? Qingyu then asked as she looked at the golden-haired figure, lying quietly asleep with his eyes closed. Chapter 278. 3. The little thing who is asking for it. Hearing that, the little toddler followed Qingyu's gaze to look, and said through pouting lips. He will naturally wake up when it's time for him to do it. He must have benefited quite a lot being by mistress' side all this time, and every time he falls into a deep sleep, it means he will become stronger. But this fellow is digesting it really slowly though. It took him more than a month when he devoured a human soul last time, and he might very well need a year before he will come awake this time. Qingyu's eyes flashed with a glint, as something came to her mind immediately. Her eyes narrowed up as she said in a suspicious voice. You said he devoured a human soul. What does that mean? Realizing that he just said something that he shouldn't have, the little toddler quickly clamped his mouth tightly shut, and shook his head vehemently. It's nothing really, that wasn't anything at all. If I remember correctly, the first time little Burrow woke up, I seemed to be able to detect a certain evil spirit presence from him. I was thinking that it was rather strange how such a haughty and arrogant fella could possibly do something like devour another spirit to make himself stronger. Speaking up till that point, Qingyu's lips then curved up into a strange knowing smile. Could you have possibly cajoled him into it? Qingyu's mind was really just too quick, and it was impossible to hide it from her. Seeing that, the little toddler could only let out a long resigned sigh as he hung his head and said, It was me, but I just wanted to help him. As a weapon spirit, how could he always be so useless and allow mistress to get hurt? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu harumphed with cold indignation. You've really got it all planned out completely, haven't you? You made use of little Burrow to come test my limits, so that you will then be able to continue to devour other spirit souls, to strengthen yourself freely and unfettered on your own, haven't you? This body that you have now must have been gained throughout shortcuts like that as well, isn't it? As far as she knew, through the records written about the Earth Fire Devil Vine, she had never come across anything that said they were able to attain spirit consciousness and gain a physical body. But this particular stock of Earth Fire Devil Vine here just had to be different from all the others. He first managed to drink her blood to attain his own spirit consciousness, and then constantly devoured spirit souls to make himself become stronger. It was thought that none among all horticulture species would be able to suppress him now. This little thing here, although he was just like a small young child, he looked rotund and seemed rather lovable. But hidden under that seemingly harmless-looking flesh shell was a demon that had lived more than 3,000 years. So how could that naive and gullible little burro possibly be able to outsmart such a conniving devil? Chapter 278. 4. The little thing who is asking for it. The expression on Qing Yu's face could not help but turn a little severe. Since you are addressing me as your mistress, you should know that if you deem me as your mistress, it is only natural that you put me first before anything else. I will not hold it against you with everything that has happened, but from today onwards, you are not allowed to try to tempt or beguile little burro with your sweet words, to entice him into doing things that I do not like. Otherwise, you will not be spared so easily. Yes, mistress, I won't dare do it any more next time. The little toddler pouted his lips and said in a rather aggrieved tone. Just as Qing Yu was about to say something more, she saw the crestfallen little thing who hung his head low suddenly raise his head up, his eyes shining as he gazed towards a certain direction, his tongue licking his lips greedily. Qing Yu's brows knitted together, and she heard a highly familiar voice sound out in the very next moment. Little fox, are you asleep? It was Lu Junyao. Qing Yu was taken aback for a moment, and before she was even able to react, she saw the figure of the scarlet-red little toddler suddenly flash, to disappear from sight in an instant. Qing Yu's gaze sharpened, like she just came to realize something, her spirit consciousness quickly exiting the dimensional space. Lu Junyao had barely just come close to Qing Yu when he saw a red light flash on her body, hurtling straight towards him in an assault. He was a little surprised as he did not have his guard up against Qing Yu at all, and because his reaction was slowed just by that instant, by the time he sensed the dangerous aura, the assailant was already inches away. You're dismissed. A voice that carried a faint tinge of anger suddenly rang out, and a disappointed groan was heard immediately after that when the sound of something heavy fell to the ground. Lu Junyao came back to his senses and saw the young lady standing right in front to shield him, her hand hanging by her side dripping bright red blood from the tips of her fingers. The look in his eyes grew deep as he held her wrist up. He saw a deep bloody gash on the back of her hand, but fortunately, her flame elemental powers were already slowly healing the wound. In the span of a few breaths' time, the wound could almost no longer be seen. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu and the child, who looked to be about 4 or 5 years of age, looked as if he had sustained heavy injuries, and was curled up as he rolled incessantly on the floor. Qing Yu walked a couple of steps forward, and looked down at the little figure from her higher vantage point, her voice completely emotionless, where one was unable to know what she was thinking. I told you before that you must not go against my wishes anymore, or I will not let you off lightly. She slowly crouched down and raised her hand that was still wet with bright red blood, her lips curling up slightly. What are you going to do now, little thing? You've wounded your mistress. As you've drunk my blood, and any time you defy my orders, you will suffer backlash like this. Are we clear? Upon saying that, Qing Yu smiled faintly as she smeared the blood on her hand onto the little toddler's body, and the little figure immediately broke out into a heart-rending painful wail, begging for mercy. Mistress, I've realized my mistake. I will not dare do it again. Arrgh, it hurts. Mistress, spare me this once. I will not dare to do it again. Chapter 279. 1. Mother has gone missing. Lu Junyao just stood there with an eyebrow arched up, watching the strange scene unfold before his eyes. Moments later, Qing Yu slowly got up from the floor, and that wailing little toddler finally stopped rolling around, reduced to a sniffling and tearful little figure, a highly pitiful sight. And when the eyes of the little figure came to see Lu Junyao again, the little figure could not help but to shiver slightly. This person here must not be touched. Never ever. Upon seeing that the expression on the little toddler had now turned into fear, Qing Yu was still not intending to let him off so easily. With a flip of her palm, a plain and unadorned but exquisite-looking black jade bottle appeared in her hand. That action caused the shade of the little toddler's face to change. Mistress, what are you going to do? Qing Yu slowly removed the stopper on the bottle, and then glanced at the little figure and said, You've been really disobedient, and you need to suffer some punishment as you remain here to reflect on yourself. I'll let you out after you've straightened out your thoughts. After she said that, Qing Yu's lips parted slightly, and she chanted something in an inaudible voice. Immediately, before the little toddler could even say anything to beg for mercy, he turned into a red streak of light and was sucked right into the bottle. Qing Yu then ignored the roiling upheaval happening inside the bottle and just kept it safely away. You really have so many strange little pets around you, Lu Junyao then said teasingly. Qing Yu raised an eyebrow. Unfortunately, they're all not very obedient. Lu Junyao curved up the ends of his lips. That thing there was trying to attack me just now? Qing Yu sighed a little helplessly before she replied. Because the blood that flows in your body is really just too tempting to him, and he lost his mind for a moment to come rushing out like that. My blood. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. My blood that is of the purest bloodline is already highly attractive to some creatures. As you have a unique body constitution, and the fact that you have my blood in your body as well, the combination creates an even bigger draw to them, almost irresistible to them. Lu Junyao understood what she was saying, and he then smiled at her to say, From what you're saying, wouldn't that mean that I am in very grave danger? Yes, it's really very dangerous. Qing Yu nodded, and then stretched her hand out to hold his hand. But I will protect you. Upon hearing that, Lu Junyao could not help but recall how she had stood in front of him to shield him just now. His brows immediately furrowed slightly as he looked down at her hand. There was not a single trace of any wound on her hand anymore, but he had clearly seen her bleed earlier. His grip on the young lady's hand tightened slightly, and the tone of his voice was serious as he said, You must not do that next time. Although you have self-healing abilities, you must not risk your own self like that. As a woman, why must you make yourself take such a strong stance? Wouldn't that make me nothing but a frivolous decorative piece beside you? Chapter 279. 2. Mother has gone missing. Qing Yu acted innocent as she blinked her eyes at him, and then went on to say slowly, But, you seem to be weaker than I am, especially when you're hurt, where anyone who can come along and do whatever they want with you. Why do I seem to feel that you're making fun of me? Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow sharply, the expression on his face unreadable as he stared unblinkingly at the young lady. His voice devilishly seductive as he leaned in close to say, In that case, the next time I get wounded, maybe we should see if I will be able to still gobble you right up. Tisk. Qing Yu's eyes were wide as she glared at him, looking a little embarrassed as she said, Can that mind of yours think of nicer thoughts instead? Wouldn't I have to look after you when you're hurt? So you'd better keep your mind on protecting yourself well. Do you hear me? Hearing that, Lu Junyao then thuggishly leaned his head onto the young lady's little shoulder. Then you must really take good care of me well, won't you? It will be best if you can develop a type of elixir that shrinks a person into a tiny small figure, so that you'll be able to bring me along wherever you go. Don't you think that is a really good idea? Can you be any more lazy than that? Then you won't even have to trouble yourself to walk, and just get carried around everywhere, isn't it? Qing Yu scoffed. This fellow was really unbelievably lazy, always either leaning against something or sitting in a limp slouch like he had no bones in that body of his. But it was just impossible to find fault with this fella here. It was as if he had been born perfect like that, where even such laziness was being elegantly portrayed by him. I've been discovered. How dull. Lu Junyao's voice came out in a low alluring laugh, and it carried a somewhat childish mischievous tint. No matter how mature and steady a man was, when before their own beloved woman, they would come to act like a child, revealing their heart's most childish side, and it could not be any more true here in this case. Little fox, there is something I don't know whether I should tell you. Lu Junyao was silent for a good while, before he suddenly opened his mouth to say, Qing Yu looked at him a little puzzledly. What is it that is making you look so serious? Lu Junyao narrowed his eyes and said slowly, When I went to the Divine Healer sect earlier, Aunt Lan told me that I must protect you and Qing Bei. Qing Yu raised an eyebrow. Is there some kind of a problem? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I did not sense any problem with those words, but her tone back then made me feel like she was leaving me with her last words. Lu Junyao said in a deep and thoughtful tone. Qingyu was taken aback. She knew that Lu Junyao would not say such things for no reason. He must surely know something, and that was why he was telling her this. The man was then heard continuing to say, I thought it was a little strange, and so I went to look into matters concerning Aunt Lon myself in private. I then discovered something that did not feel right. What didn't feel right? Aunt Lon stayed in the Bright Moon Divine Temple from a very young age, as she was the godly lord's youngest daughter, and was also his most favorite. It was said that she was a willful and unruly girl, and her cultivation could only be considered to be average among the goddesses. I also found out that she had never studied medicine before. Chapter 279. 3. Mother has gone missing. Having spoken up till that point, Lu Junyao then paused for a moment, as doubts crept into his head. But an accident occurred in the year when she turned 10, where she accidentally fell into an icy lake while playing. Although she was pulled out of there in the nick of time, she was wrecked by a persistent high fever, her breaths growing weaker and weaker. Many elixir cultivators were at their wits' end, their diagnosis determining she might not survive. But in the evening on the second day, she miraculously recovered. But ever since then, her personality changed completely, like she had turned into another person, no longer willful and domineering like before, but became strangely quiet and aloof, keeping her distance away from people. And her cultivation suddenly rose sharply, suddenly skilled and well-versed in elixir cultivation, making everyone think that she had been possessed. Qingyu listened quietly and then turned to him and said, Because they were in fact really not the same person? Her mind was smart and quick, and after hearing Lu Junyao say it so many times, she immediately thought that things were not as simple as it seemed. The two personalities were a world apart from each other, and there could only be two possibilities in such a situation. The first would be just like her own, where a soul is resurrected in another person's body, and the other possibility is when two different people came to be swapped entirely, as no matter how much a person changed, they could not possibly become so different from the person they were before. Your guess is correct. Lu Junyao nodded as he said, The real Aunt Lon is actually the current one who is well versed in medicine and elixir cultivation, a person with deep and unfathomable cultivation. All information about her first 10 years came out a complete blank, which makes me suspect just where Aunt Lon really came from. And Lu Junyao's gaze grew complicated as he looked at the young lady before him as he continued to say, pausing at every word. She also told me that if I do not want anything to happen to you, I must make sure that you do not go to the Mind-Free Peak. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A fleeting thought then seemed to flash very briefly through Qingyu's mind, but it happened so fast that she was unable to capture anything. She then opened her mouth to mumble softly. Could it be possible that my mother is really linked to the Mind-Free Peak in some way or other? Although quite a bit of rumors about it has been heard, but who really knew what kind of a place it really was? That is what I am guessing as well. But only Aunt Lon herself will know whether that is really the truth. Lu Junyao stretched his hand out to stroke the young lady's head. But I am in agreement to what she said, and do not want you to put yourself at risk there. It is because Mother is possibly linked to the Mind-Free Peak in some way that I must go there, so that I can get a clear picture of the entire situation. Qingyu said persistently. The look on Lu Junyao's face was a little helpless, and he was just about to say something when a tiny little stone inside the dimensional space of his storage ring suddenly reacted, pulsating with a soft flashing light. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.